Good morning. This is Vern Danforth with the Florida DOT's CAD office. Welcome to File and Model Management Workflow, part 4 of our continuing series of webinars on getting started with FDOT Connect for Open Roads Designer. As we start today, I'd like to point out there is a Q&A dialogue for you to key in your questions during this webinar. We have a team of people here prepared to respond to the questions. If we have some time at the end, I'll go through the questions and see if there's anything that I can answer post haste. Otherwise, we have been compiling Q&A with the posted information. As such, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our recorded webinars website along with the Q&A document. Without further ado, there's just some review. Obviously, when you load in your FDOT Connect software on your machine, you'll get a desktop folder. On there will be several icons. I did want to point out that the webinars can be found on our website. So if you just go to that, click on it, come down here and see both the scheduled webinars and the posted webinars are out here on that link. So if you come over here, you'll see that we've also now added this Getting Started with FDOT Connect webinar series. And currently there are the 3 that we've previously recorded, as well as the presentations and the Q&A. Looks like there's one presentation that they didn't use on the first one. So that's the first order. So let me just move this back. I'll be kind of going back and forth. Today's session, we're going to be covering several topics, as many as we can get to, related to file and model management workflow. So I've already kind of talked about the folder and the shortcuts. I did want to point out that we are working on a new Create Project application or tool. I'll be previewing that this morning. And then we'll be talking about really just starting a project. So getting the SURVRD file first and what to do with it, and then the Create File tool and some of the file and model management workflows that we're recommending. Going to be talking a lot about single source data management and what that means. And then also 3D model management. And then hopefully I can, I'll have time to preview a sheet creation through the Create Files tool. I know a lot of people are curious about how sheets are going to get created. It's a preview for the next session, which will be the plans production session, which will be focused all on sheet creation. So hopefully that'll get us enough for you all to have some introduction to it. Let me just show you the Create Project tool real quick that we've been working on. Currently, if you have the software installed, you won't have the icon. As you can see, I still don't have an icon. This is a shortcut to the actual tool that we're building. But essentially, it's a new revision to the old Create Project tool. If you remember, prior to SS3 and SS4, we had a Create Project that we used for starting project, basically the project folder structure for the CAD project. You'll notice that there's 3 platforms on here, depending upon which platform you're starting your project in. In this case, I'm setting it to Bentley Connect. This tool is going to do some updated things. In the past, you'll notice it looks a lot different. There's not as many tabs. Essentially, what we're trying to do is make it easier and more consistent as far as the attributes that we're going to be tracking on a project. It's becoming more and more critical that we have consistent attributes on all projects because of the way that we're loading them into the vault. And so in order to make it more consistent, we've added the ability to load it from our financial management system. And there's also the ability to load it from what's called a JSON file, which is really an export from the financial management system. So the idea is that the workflow is that as a project gets started in the district, either the project manager or the CAD manager in the district will have the ability to load up the project data and create the project from FM. If you're a consultant and you need the project structure, data structure, and you don't have the attributes, you can email the project manager for the FM file, and they can give you what's called a JSON file that you can load in the attributes. So I'm just going to key in a number here and show you how it gets populated. So I've got a project here, 22049555201. And if it's a valid project number, when I choose load, it goes out and it picks all the data from the FM system. There are a few fields here currently, since this is in development, that we still need to populate with the federal aid number and the contract numbers and some of these things, but that's something our developers are currently working on. You'll notice that there's tabs here for the different other data that gets populated. Looks like state road and bridge numbers are still in the works as well. But what happens when you hit this create button is it goes out and it creates the CAD work set directory structure as well as a couple other files. So I wanted to show you that real quick. So I'm not going to create it, so let me close this out and show you one that's already been created, that same project that was created, because I don't want to duplicate it. So mine is defaulting to work sets. I know some of you are working with your projects on servers, so you will be able to set that path to whatever your server location is so that it locates it. Same thing with when you install the software, you can change the location of where you want your default work sets to be. Now, on my machine, I'm setting it to work sets, and under work sets, I have all of my project folders. With each project folder, you get two other files. One is a config file that allows you to set some custom configuration variables. Essentially, those are just other paths to things that you might want to have access to when you launch the software. The DGNWS, for the most part, contains the attributes of the project that can be utilized for automating sheet production. Things like title block information. That's the way we're going with that. So what happens when you run the create project is it creates this folder, and it creates the two specific files that go with it. So in this case, it created these two files. This is actually it's a design file with a DGNWS that has the project properties, and our workspace, since it's connected to the project number, will know to pull the project properties from there. But also it creates another file, which is this meta info in the meta info folder, which is called the project properties.xml. And essentially that's all the properties that were pulled from FM. And this is something that we're utilizing to auto-populate the properties when we upload it into Vault. So this whole create project tool is going to be very critical as we go forward. So I wanted to point that out. This is just another screenshot of that tool. So let me just kind of go through some review. Obviously, when you open up the OpenRoads or the FDOT Connect software on your machine from the desktop folder, first thing you're going to do is go in and set it to the FDOT workspace. So that's what you see right here, the FDOT workspace. If you've got other workspaces on your machine, Ohio, Georgia, whatever, Alabama, this allows you to go in and set it to whatever state standards you're working for on your project. From there, you're going to browse to a blank file that gets created when the project gets created. And from there, you're going to start building your files for your project. Obviously, as soon as you open up the software, you're going to go to this OpenRoads modeling. That'll set it to the FDOT menu that will give you the ability to create your files like you normally do with our workspace. And I'm going to kind of cover that. All right, so let's talk about just starting a project. What are the things that you need? So obviously, as a designer, you're going to need your existing survey file, and in that survey file is going to be your DTM, your baselines. If you've already got your proposed alignments generated, either something that gets carried forward, or you may need to create them, but obviously that'll be one of the first steps. There's some other things to think about is your surveyor may or may not give you a contiguous terrain file. Sometimes the files are too large for your project and you may need to split them out just to make it work a little faster. Sometimes smaller files, sometimes you get projects where the surveyors have given you a bunch of smaller files and you may need to create a single terrain file just to make life easier as you're designing and modeling. A lot of this really depends on the number of people that you're going to have designing and modeling on the project, as well as the file sizes. You know, these are just some things that we've always talked about. Matter of fact, I pulled these slides from 10 years ago when we were using SS2 and quarter modeling. It's the same issues going forward, whether we're in SS3, SS4, or ORD. So these are just some things to remember. And a lot of these things are very important on the things to consider at the beginning of a project, because you don't want to run into issues as you're halfway in it and building corridors and things are starting to crash because your terrain file was too large, or those type of things. So, you know, it's really important as we start with ORD to do a lot of the thought process up front as far as how you want to break this project up. Same thing goes for your project storage location, whether it's server or local, it's a vault checkout, or if it's project-wise. I know we all work in different, you know, depending upon who you talk to, everybody does it a little differently. Of course, all of our districts work with the vault. Some of the mom and pop shops work with local files or server files. Project-wise is another thing. Regardless of where your project is located, you know, it's always recommended to copy or check out your files locally and work on them locally, and then check them back in or what have you at the end of the day. That's really just standard file management practice. You're going to find that as you're using ORD or SS4, SS3 for that matter, the software always seems to work faster and crashes less if you're working on the files locally, if you have that ability. And then you can always check the files back in at the end of the day or at the end of your work session. I'm going to do a lot of this live, but I may come back to this slide as well. Essentially, when it comes to modeling, you need to be thinking about how to break up your models. This is some things that we started talking about in some of our training sessions. Essentially, you know, you're always going to have your SURVRD file, which is going to have most of your topo. But I'm showing here that I would recommend, and I'm going to do this today, is to build a separate terrain file, mainly because you know, when you're turning it on and off different reference files, it's always nice to have that terrain file easily accessible and able to set active. I'll show you that in a little minute. The other thing is that you're going to want to make sure that you store any of your proposed alignments and profiles and super elevation in the alignment file separate. I know some people like to do it in the DSGN RD file, but honestly, to protect and to lock down those controlling alignments, I strongly recommend that you save them in an alignment file and use that as a reference file, even to your DSGN file, and for that matter, your corridor files as well. And then, of course, your DSGN RD file is mainly going to be for your planimetrics, and you see that the existing model file, we used to call it a GKLNRD file. In ORD, we don't have any terminology as far as Geopat goes, so we're going kind of following along what we did with the Civil 3D side, which is just calling it another model file, and then you can put an identifier at the end that it's for your existing features. And then when you build your models for your project, you know, this is just one example of how you can break up your models, where you have your mainline corridors in one model file. You might want to do your end conditions in another model file, and maybe some of the detail modeling around intersections in a separate one. It all depends really on your project. The key here is that that you define how you want to break up your models, how you want to break up your design files, so that you have a single source of data, and it's and you're able to work on them at the same time. That even goes for the ITL files. I know some projects where they break up the ITL files based upon what they're modeling for. So in this case, you might have just a end conditions template library just for modeling end conditions, and then the drainage folks can be out there modeling all the ditches and any walls or anything that's outside of what's considered the backbone. And then you just basically do your corridors, backbone corridors in the other model file, and have the main corridors in that ITL file. These are just some things to consider as you're starting your project and setting it up as how you're going to approach it. All of that really kind of boils up into a model management plan. And so, you know, we're recommending in a lot of our project reviews that working with the district project managers, that this gets negotiated up front on projects. So, you know, at the staff hour estimates and getting in the proposals, I would recommend that the district project managers start asking for model management plans, so that consultants in the districts have a plan for how they plan to divide the project up. Now it can change as the project goes along, and you get, you know, as you get more aware of all the finite details of project, you may have to revise the model management plan, but creating it up front and making the revisions as you go along is going to go a long way for model reviews at different stages of delivery. So you can deliver your model management plan, and you know, it's similar to a project layout sheet. I've seen it done different ways. I've seen it done in a design file. I've seen it done in a KMZ file, so that when it goes to construction, the contractor even gets the model management plan as far as how the project gets delivered and where all the files are and what is contained in each of them. There's nothing worse than getting somebody's CAD.zip file and trying to figure out where they modeled what without a model management plan. So I think I've probably driven that point home enough. So let me just move on to the next slide here. This is the create file tool. I'm going to do this live on all these things here. So let me just get into the software. And first thing I'm going to do is show you where you can go in and, of course, set your workspace, and then you come in here and set your work set, and then that'll point to whatever the folders are for that project. And if I go to browse, you'll see that I'm sitting over here in the survey folder. Of course, I've got all the different folders that were built out here. So the first file I want to look at is this SURVRD file. So I'm going to open that up. I know we're going to cover this in a session in the future, but I do want to point out a couple things in the SURVRD. I think all surveyors are now on board with building this SURVRD file and delivering it. And it contains pretty much everything that you need for design, all in one file. And then, so, you know, in the old days, we used to deliver 4 or 5 different files with a topo file and a right-of-way file and a utilities file and a terrain file, all that stuff. Now it's all contained in one. And this, I think I have everything on in here, but if you wanted to see or if you wanted to filter this file out by the different file types that we used to deliver, I think a lot of you already know this. You can go to the level display dialog. You can switch this to filters. And now if you just want to see alignment data, you can switch it to just alignment data. Or if you want to see the terrain data, you can go to the GDTM and you can turn off the alignment data. If you want to see topo data, you can turn on the topo and turn off the terrain. So anything that you want to see that you're used to seeing, you can always reference it into a file and then just go into the filters and turn off. Essentially, you're just turning off levels, but you're doing it by filter names. So those, we built those in SS4, and I recommend that if you're not using those, to go ahead and use those. But one thing I did want to point out, though, is that if you're, I don't think right now we're requiring surveyors to deliver a specific GDTM file or a TIN model. I'm not sure if those are the deliverables. If they are, that's great. If you only get a SURVRD file, though, it's very easy to create an XML file of just the terrain and then build a new terrain. So I'll show you how you could do that. I'm going to switch this to filters, and I'm going to set it to GDTM. I'll turn off the topo, and now all I have is the terrain that was delivered for that file being displayed. Now there is a boundary element, so if you were to hover over it and right click, you can get to the terrain and then left click, and now if I hover over it, I can actually, I can go to the properties of it, I can turn on and off different things, triangles, all the contours, everything is contained in the terrain element. The other thing that I can do is go to the terrain tools, and I can choose to export that, this terrain. Or I can do it from the context menu, if I can get the context menu to show up. Over here is the second one here is an export to land XML. It will also export to a TIN, but in this case, I'm just going to do the land XML. And then you just tell it what the project name is going to be, what the description, you want to export both the triangles and the features. So you set both, and you just come out here and you give it a file name and you export or save it to there. So I'm not going to do it because I already created it once. So now that I've exported my terrain out, you can go in and create the GDTM file that didn't get displayed that I'm sort of recommending. So it's pretty easy to do that. You can go to the FDOT menu now. I don't need the level display open anymore. And you'll notice that the menus have slightly changed. I think we're starting to get to a final version of where we want everything. So you're going to see create file right here. Brings up the create file tool, and I'm going to set it to roadway survey files, and there's a GDTM option. I just have to make sure I got my county set or my coordinate system set. You'll see that I've already got, there's already a 01, so it's automatically sequencing this. I could even add in here existing ground if I wanted to for an identifier, and then do the create open file. And this little alert asks you, do you want to associate this new file with the work set for this project number? And in this case, I do want to, so I'm going to choose that radio button and then choose open. You don't have to do this. I find it a little simpler to find the terrain in this GDTM file. You can always get it from the SURVRD file if you want to. And yes, we still have the attached survey references tool, which if you're familiar with it, it used to, for any file that you create and you wanted to attach the survey files, you could use this tool and it would attach the SURVRD file 4 times, and it would filter out for the 4 different files that you used to be able to, that we used to get delivered from survey. So it would be the topo, the right-of-way, the utilities, and the terrain file. In this case, I'm just building that terrain file on its own, so that if I ever just wanted to attach a terrain to a model, I could do it without having to do the whole SURVRD. And then so you would come over to the terrain tools here and choose from file, pick the existing XML file. And this is similar to what we've always had with SS4. Go into the feature definitions and go to the terrain folder, and then you're going to pick DTM existing and have it build from the XML both the source and definition. As soon as you choose import, close that, fit the view, and now I have just this terrain in this file. So it's that simple. Once you've got that, you know, the terrain, it's in a 3D file. So if you do a right click, instead of using your function keys in this new FDOT Connect software, we've also implemented all the view controls off of a right click. So if you want to see two views, you can just do the right click and go to two views this way. And now I've got a rendered view over here. If I want to turn on the triangles so that I can see the display, I can turn those on by double clicking that, and you see these are rendered, and this is just a wireframe mode. You can change the different ways that you view terrains. So if I want to go to the display styles, I can pick one that is by height. And now I'm looking at a thematic height. I could also change it to slope, but I'm going to work on the height one here. And let me just view previous on this. I didn't want to do that view. No, I'll just change this back to wireframe. Leave that one at wireframe. And so now you can see the different heights in the terrain. So anything that's hot like this is high, and anything that's blue like this is low. So you can obviously review your terrain that way. But so these are just some of the terrain tools that you have out there. Let's look at the next option will be, well, let me go back and open up that SURVRD file. And I think I just wanted to point out that the alignments were in there. So I can always go back to browse this way, open up the SURVRD file. I want to point out two things about the alignments in the SURVRD file. So the SURVRD file is delivering baselines, and sometimes you need those for your project. So there's really two ways to use those in the DSGN RD file. You can either import them, or I'm sorry, in the alignment file, you can either import them or you can just reference them. So in this case, you'll see that if I go to if I use Control E, which is the old way of doing level display, and just turn on the alignments, you'll see these are actually placed out here. Okay, they don't have stationing, and I could easily click on one of these and export it using the, I'm sorry, you can't export it from the context menu. You have to go to geometry, and then you can do the export right here, and then you pick an alignment, and you can export and align to an XML file. So I've done it both ways in a file. So I'm not going to, I've actually got this exported to an XML file, and I'm going to show you a couple different ways to use it in an alignment file. All right, so the next thing I want to do is create the alignment file. That's the next thing I would need. So I'm going to go to my FDOT menu, create files. I'll switch this over to the roadway files, and you'll see that these can now be sorted. I don't know if you guys knew that, but you can sort these. Go to the ALGN RD file. I've already got one created. I'm going to create another one. And notice down here now that the action is creating a new model called super elevation. And then there's no more different active scales, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to go ahead and create this now. I set it to my current work set, and then I'll close this. So now that I have that, I can either now reference in the SURVRD baselines, or I can obviously import them in. So what I'm going to do first is import my proposed alignment. Let's say that I got my proposed alignment already designed and it has a profile and I just need to put it in this ALGN file. Otherwise, you would lay it out with the geometry tools, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to import one. When you do the import, you're going to select, just like the old way, you're going to select what you want. So I picked the wrong one. Let me do that again. I want the State Road 61 file, not the existing. So this one actually has notice it has no feature, but it does have a profile. So I'm going to select that and do the import, create civil rules. And if I fit the view here, you'll see that I now have my alignment. But I could also reference in, but before I do that, let me go ahead and change this to the correct feature. So notice now it doesn't have a feature, but if I click over here, I can assign the alignment feature that goes with a center line. And what you'll see is that it now places that out there, draws that out there. The next thing I'm going to do is reference in my survey file, but I'm going to filter it for just the alignments. So I can either go to the home screen and then go to the attach references over here, or we've added a new function key, F9, that brings up the reference file dialog. So what I'm going to do is attach the survey file. Go ahead and attach it. And then through the level display dialog, I'm just going to select this and filter it only for alignments. And then go back to the alignment, set this back to levels, and do a file save settings, which is Control F. The other place you can get to it is over here under File, Save Settings. Now, in SS4, we didn't have the ability to annotate or put these stationed ticks on it. In ORD, you do have that ability. So the first thing you'll do is go to the drawing production, and there is element annotation right here. And note that you have your drawing scale set to 1 to 50 here. So I'm going to go to annotate element, and I'm going to pick this center line. Our features now are built in with the annotation display styles set to the feature. So as long as you use our features, you can use this annotate element tool and you're going to get everything accordingly. Obviously, if anything were to change with this alignment, if I wanted to change this radius, the station goes with it as well. So all the annotation is built in that way. If you change the scale to like 100, you'll see that the annotation scales up and down depending upon what the scale is of your design file. If you go to a higher scale like 500 and you don't want to see every 100 feet, we've built in these level filters over here under the FDOT menu filters. You'll see that if you just want to display 500-foot majors according to the standards, all you have to do is filter it out. Essentially what we're doing is we're putting this annotation on different levels, and these filters are turning on and off different levels. If you just wanted to see it every 1,000 feet for whatever drawing scale type that you're talking about, you can set it that way. One thing to notice is that the drawing scale doesn't stay active everywhere. But all you have to do is go to the drawing production tab here, right click, and you can pin this group to all workflows and it stays active in your session. So it'll pop it up over here now. So then I can switch this back to say 1 to 50. And now I'm looking at, I got to go back to my filters and set it back to the just one every 100 feet. So that's how you can do the alignments. It does work off of reference files. So if I go to the drawing production and say annotate element and pick this reference file element and reset, you'll see it does the stationing off of those two. So you can have different annotations in different files for different alignments from references if you need to. Let me go ahead and go to a rotated view here. I'll just rotate it like this. So that's your alignment file. This is also where you would put in your profiles. I believe this one has a profile already that I just imported. So if I open up a profile view over here, it's going to have the profile there. Notice you don't see the existing ground. Why? Because I don't have that that file referenced. If I did want to reference it, I could just go to F9, attach, and what I would recommend is going to the GDTM file in the survey that we just created. So I created this one, existing ground. There's the one I did previously. I just attach it. I can always turn these triangles off. Just have to override the symbology and turn these off. And then if you set this active, this is for profiling, you'll get the existing ground profile to show up in your profile view. Next week, we're going to talk about how you cut up your sheets. All right, so the next file, so we've talked about the GDTM, the alignment file, the SURV file. I'm going to talk about the DSGN file next. So, before I go, you're also going to set up all your super in this file as well, is what we recommend. That way you've got everything sort of protected, your alignments, your profiles, your super elevation, and then this file will get referenced to your DSGN file and your model files for you to use as you're designing along. That'll allow more than one person to have access to the changes if they're modeling separate pieces of the project. This will all be documented in our design and modeling course guide, as well, of course, being recorded with this session. What I did want to point out is that the model file is actually created when you create the file. I think I pointed that out during the create file, but you can see here, this is a super elevation model. And then you would have to come in here and reference in the default model and go ahead and lay out your super elevation accordingly. And we probably will have a more detailed design criteria webinar in the future where we'll cover this, creating the super in ORD. So I'll go back to the models, go back to my default. The function keys still do work if you want to use them for the different views. You can still use those. I've just gotten used to going to the view control off of a right click. So the next thing I want to do is create the DSGN file. So I'm going to go to the create file tool here again and go to this DSGN, make sure that I've got the county and the coordinate system. And now this is going to create an O2 file. And if you want to put in a different modifier option here, you can do that. Now, one thing that I did do is I kind of investigated a Moteef file. So let me go back to this bubble diagram, which is right. Where'd that go? So if you want to build a Moteef file of some of these together and use that as a reference file, a nested reference file, that's perfectly acceptable, especially when you get to the model file. So I'll show that in a minute. But like right now, once I've created this DSGN RD file, I would just go in and with the typical references and go out here and attach my alignment file, in this case, the O2 file, and right now it's not nested, so it would only bring in whatever the first level of references are. So if I fit this view, it should be just since the alignment is the only thing active in here, if I set this nesting to 1, I'm going to get the reference file that came with it. So this came from the SURVRD file, both of these. So that's how you can use the nesting to keep your single source data. So this is still coming from GDTM, this is coming from SURVRD, and this is in the alignment file. So that protects everything as you're using it in your design. Now from here, this is where you're going to lay out your planometrics. So I'll just go ahead and place a quick civil cell of the alignment work. So I'm going to open up this is the place civil cell dialog. And if you open the browse button here, I can go to we've kind of split them into 2D and 3D. So you'll know right where to go to. So in the FDM exhibits, this 306-5 is the one for 4-lane divided. And then you just pick a center line, right click, accept. And now essentially that's where you're going to do all your planometrics for the project. This is typically where all the civil cells, 2D, microstation, all that stuff is being placed. So the next thing I want to talk about is the models. So let's say that I want to just model my corridor, my mainline corridor for this project in one model file, and maybe I'll model the other one in another model file. I'll do the intersection in a third model file. So obviously you're just going to go in and start creating those files. So I'm going to do the create file here. First model file I'm going to make is for my mainline corridor, so I'm going to go pick this MODL RD and choose, if I wanted to here, I can say SR61, and then name them accordingly. As long as this has been pre-identified in your model management plan, then you've already got a roadmap for how you're going to build these files. Okay. So for this file, since I've already created a Moteef file, I'm going to go ahead and attach that. So out here, I've created a Moteef file, and I'll show you what that is. When I choose open, I'm going to allow nesting. I'm going to set the depth to 1. Choose OK. And it attaches it. And now I'm pretty much ready to go with modeling. And if you want to see, let me just rotate this view real quick. Got a bug. If you want to see what is referenced, you can go here and you see I've got my alignment file, my terrain file, my SURV file, and my DSGN are all now referenced in here. So it's that quick to be able to attach files. Obviously, if you wanted to attach something else, or if you wanted to turn something off that was in the SURV file, you can go here. If you want to turn that just the survey file off itself, you can through the display dialog. If you want to turn the terrain on or off, you can do it from the Moteef file. So you still can use Moteefs in this workflow as well. The last thing I wanted to show you is a project that has been set up like this, and then give me 2 minutes to show a project that has the end conditions. It's the same project, it's just under a different work set. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and change the work set to a different project that's been set up. And I do want to make sure I create a key sheet and show you how that gets set up. So I'm going to switch over here to this other project, and I'm going to go to a model file for end conditions. So let me browse out here. This model for end conditions. I'll show you how it's set up. It's the same project. It's just advanced a little bit farther with the file in model management development. Okay. So this is the corridor. You can see how it's been modeled. If you do an F7, you should be able to turn off your constructions. But this looks like it's all one corridor, but it's actually three. This file is the end conditions model, and then I've got a corridor model and the two end conditions model. And what I've done is I've used, if I turn on F7, there's actually two template drops that are running along here, one on the right side and one on the left side. And I'm using a point control off of the backbone of the mainline corridor to just draw in whatever independent ditch I have on either side. And that gives me the ability to let one modeler work on the backbone and a separate modeler or a drainage engineer to work on these ditches. And since it's all working off of, in this case, a point control of this line right here, this buffer line, that if something happens with anything, if something happens with the horizontal alignment, the vertical alignment, a template on the mainline corridor, this connection point is going to be updated the next time this file is opened, and therefore I'll see all the changes to it. And of course, when you cut a section through your alignment, you're going to see everything as though it was connected together. And if you cut, this is a dynamic section, of course. And if you cut sections for sheets, it'll be the same thing. You may have to update the drawing boundaries, which Chris will show in a future, as far as seeing the updates to the models as you're building them. That was the one thing I just wanted to point out. I know a lot of you are wondering about sheets, so I wanted to go to the create file and show you how sheets are going to work. So let's look at a typical section sheet, possibly. Before I do that, I want to look at this SUMRQ and copy this here real quick. So let's say I want to create a typical section sheet. The way it works in, and Chris is going to cover this in more detail, but let's say I want to create that in this project. I would go ahead and say create open. I got ahead of myself there. This is the way you don't want to do it. Anything that's a one-off sheet, you just want to create a sheet model in the create file dialog. And we're going to be adding all of these actions for the one-off sheets, so that what I just did, you won't have to do, or I should say, you won't do, because we're going to have actions in there that bring you right into the sheet model that you want. Well, this is good. I didn't want to use that anyway. So I'm going to crash out of here. And of course, I have a dialog over here that will do the clear crash if I wanted to, but I could just get back into the software this way. All right, I'm going to set this work set to this one here, and I'll just browse into the blank file for now and do the create sheet. Like I said, this is a preview to the plan development section, but I know a lot of you are curious as to how these are going to work, so I wanted to do a little bit of a review on it. All right, thank you for your patience. Let me go to it's not quite loaded yet. So create file, and what I wanted to do is, you see this action right here, which is model create. This is a key in that gets created when you create the file. So I was copying that. I was going to the typical section, and I was going to paste this. Like I said, all these actions are going to be in the next release of this tool. Of course, it's not a summary. It's going to be typical. And then I'm going to create it. So the next release of the software will have all these key-ins built in. So when you do the create, choose open, it's going to bring you right into a sheet model. Now I know sheet models are new to most of us in MicroStation. I mean, they've been out there for a long time. We just haven't utilized them in the FDOT workflow. But with ORD, we're full on using sheet models and drawing models. And what I mean by that is if you go to the home, whenever you create a file, you have the ability to create it in 3 different types. You have a design file, which is what we've always used, always, a drawing model, and a sheet model. We're going in ORD, the whole sheet production is all based on this technology. So the sheet model is the last thing. So we're not putting borders on DGN files anymore. We're not scaling a border up. We're actually attaching a scaled down version of the design to the real units of a sheet. And we have, we're also talking about different sheet sizes, as you've heard. So, but for this demonstration, it's the standard 11 by 17 sheet. Okay, so when I created that, it went out to the seed file, and the seed file has in it the border sheet necessary. So it's already got the border built into it. Now all you do for these one-off sheets is you can go and add, if you want to go to the cell libraries, you can go over here and bring up this cell library tool, and I can go to the typical section, and I can pick whichever one this is and make it the active drawing. Come to the drawing tools here, place the active cell, and notice that the scale is set to 1:1. So anything, all of our cells now, you don't have to worry about scaling them. They just come in at the 1:1 scale. Same thing if you wanted to add an LDM table to this. You could go to the FDOT menu, go over to Link Data Manager, choose Add a Link, create it from a miscellaneous, and then if you wanted to add existing pavement table slopes, choose OK, save it out here to your local roadway folder like you normally do, and then place it out here in the file. So this is how, oh, sorry, I got to pick the right worksheet and do this one, choose OK. And it should be placing it out here. There we go. I can place it, or anything else for that matter. Key sheets will be handled a little bit differently, but Chris is going to show you that. It's going to use a drawing model, and then you will be putting a sheet border. There will be the ability to put sheet borders in sheets. So that's pretty much how the one-offs are going to be. As far as planning profiles, cross sections, other detail sheets, Chris is going to kind of cover some of that in the actual name boundary tool that we'll be utilizing for cutting sheets, and also the sheet indexes and all that type of thing. That may have been it for this session. So I was going to see if there's any questions that I can cover that haven't already been addressed. We've got about 5 minutes left. I know a lot of these are, some of them are quarter questions. Here's a question about when to use open roads. I know this was covered in the frequently asked questions early on, but I'll repeat it again. Our software for FDOT Connect was released in July. Our time frame for moving people to ORD is 18 months. So that means that districts have the option to start projects, new starts to be either in SS4 or ORD between now and January 2021. After January 2021, all projects shall be started in ORD. So it's really up to the districts to decide which projects they want to use in the software. If they're very innovative and progressive, they'll start using ORD. If they're a little bit conservative, they may want to do the projects in SS4. When you start a project in either platform, you're going to finish it in that platform. There won't be any conversion. That even goes for survey. I know that a few of you have thought about maybe converting the survey. It can be done. It's not recommended. most people need to know about that. So that's pretty much how that works. As far as training, obviously we're doing the webinars as something to get you started. There is going to be workshops out in the districts where we're going to send a group of us to the districts to do some training. It'll be very high level training from soup to nuts, from survey to automated quantities. That starts beginning of next year. We'll have enough seats for 40 people, and the district's designers will have the first choice at seats, and any consultants working on active ORD projects can also get on into that training. And there's some other training things coming up. We're going to be doing some stuff at the FLUG, some stuff at the symposium, and some other things coming up. So I know that the team looks like they've answered most everything. I'll go ahead and review any of these, and if there's any kind of revisions or anything that we didn't get, we'll make sure that we get an answer posted, both in the Q&A document, and then also obviously out on the website. So I think that covers pretty much everything that I had planned to cover today. So thank you for your attention, and please feel free to keep sending us any questions that you have through our cad.support@dot.state.fl.us. Good luck and happy ORDing, so to speak. And that's the end of this webinar.